A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, the perfect place to run your online business. Can I just be completely honest with you? I don't think anyone needs the iPhone 14 Pro. It's genuinely unnecessary. I had the 13 Pro 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I can't tell the difference between what's in my pocket. In fact, the battery on the 14 Pro actually feels a little bit worse, but more on that later. This isn't all doom and gloom. I actually really like the iPhone 14 Pro, so let me try and explain what I want to get across in this video. And I think this starts with figuring out who's benefiting from this phone and who's potentially buying it. Person number one, the everyday user. This is Apple's target market, literally the entire planet. And person two, the creative user. The people that buy the new phone every single year for the new camera updates or software updates. People like me and probably you watching this video. If you're the type of person that uses a phone camera for Snapchat, photos of your dog, photos of coffee, a family holiday, I'm assuming you're satisfied with the iPhone 10 or any camera phone from the last 4 to 5 years. Which leads me on to thinking that most people don't need the new 48 megapixel ProRAW camera. And I bet most people don't even know what ProRAW is. The iPhone is an amazing tool for creative people who want to take better photos and better videos, and in some cases use it as a professional tool. I would consider myself that person. I have no problem filming YouTube videos on this, taking photos that are being posted on Instagram, even lifestyle behind the scenes content. The fact that this fits in your pocket, of course we're going to take advantage of it. And those creative people that have a creative outlet, whether that's just for their hobby or in some cases professional use, this is fantastic. But there's a catch. My iPhone 14 Pro feels identical to my iPhone 13 Pro, which I had last week, and the battery life seems a little bit worse. Is that a software issue? iOS 16 and updates recently have been a lot different to software from previous years ago, so the battery can't handle it as good. It's not a massive issue. I mean, the 13 Pro had great battery life, so therefore the 14 Pro has great battery life. First world problems, right? I'll just charge it a few more times than usual. Not really an issue. But I upgraded my phone and I don't feel like I got an upgrade in battery life. Just my honest opinion. Now let's talk about this always on display. I thought we were trying to use our phones less. The always on display is possibly the most distracting feature they could have added, bar a always vibrating feature. So yeah, I turned that off straight away. So you might be asking yourself, should I upgrade? Should you buy the new iPhone 14 Pro? And the honest answer is that none of us need to upgrade. Consumerism makes us feel like we're missing out for sure. That's what good marketing does. If you want the 48 megapixel files from the iPhone 14, fine, upgrade. But if you're happy with the photos you're getting from your iPhone 12, then why not wait a few more years until the difference is more noticeable? Alright, so I expect most normal people have left this video now, and from here on out, I will get a little bit more nerdy about the cameras. Before I do that, I'd like to tell you about the sponsors of this video, Squarespace. I've created a blog over on my website sharing these sample images from the iPhone if you want to see them in better quality. Using the sponsors of this video, Squarespace makes it super straightforward for me to put together reviews like this in a matter of minutes. I've been using Squarespace as a place to host my portfolio of work, sell my presets and run my business for the last few years, and it's been essential. From hundreds of easy to use templates, whether you're selling something, hosting a gallery of images, or launching a personal project, Squarespace can make it happen. Head to Squarespace for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Mike Chudley to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. This year, the focal length on the main regular wide lens has changed. I don't think this is something everyday users are going to notice, but it's definitely something creative people will be aware of when they start using the camera. The iPhone 14 Pro is a 24mm focal length compared to last year's models, which were a 26mm focal length. And in my opinion, this is too wide for everyday use. My favorite focal length as a photographer is anywhere between 35mm and 50mm. I think you get a much more natural look and compression on your subjects. So I shoot with a Fujifilm X100V as my everyday camera, and that shoots at a 35mm focal length. And that makes everything look beautiful. Just ask any Fuji fanboy, they'll say the same thing. Here's how I noticed this 2mm difference. When I was in London taking photos, or taking photos of my friend's car, when I was using the regular wide lens, the main x1 camera, I noticed it was just a little unnatural. I felt too far away from everything. I felt like the corners on my perspective was slightly warped. I questioned my compositions a little bit. My way to fix this was actually by using the new x2 icon that the iPhone 14 Pro has been added to. This gives a much better focal length, and I find it much easier to compose my images. I much preferred the x2 look than I did the regular wide lens. And I thought if you wanted a wider image, you would just use the ultra wide lens, which is obviously very wide. The x1 24mm look kind of doesn't sit right with me at the moment. But then it hit me. These thoughts are coming from an opinionated, snobby photographer. I care about a 2mm difference in focal length. Will the everyday person that's taking photos on Snapchat, posting on an Instagram story, taking photos of their dog, taking photos of their coffee, I bet they're not even aware that this is a 24mm lens and not a 26mm lens. And if anything, they're probably happier that it feels a little bit wider. The 48MP ProRAW is exceptional. The best way to use it to its full advantage is when editing your images so you can adjust the intensity of the picture profile. In Lightroom, you can see the entire scale of how ProRAW affects your images. The standard DNG file in your camera roll isn't anywhere near as good as you think compared to seeing it when editing. After a full day in London shooting some street photography and some car photography one morning with a friend of mine, I was surprised how good it was to edit with those ProRAW 48MP files. Granted, it's still a phone and it often feels way too sharp and too digital. However, the 48MP RAW image is a lot softer than the 12MP JPEG. The way the small details and harsh highlights look on the 48MP ProRAW file is actually noticeably better. Here's one of the final images I edited, and I can't believe this came from my phone. It's beautiful. Are you someone that likes to edit the photos you've taken on your phone? This might be the best I've ever seen from a phone camera. But then I tested something interesting. Where do most people consume their images? Instagram. So I put some photos on my Instagram story with the 48MP ProRAW compared directly next to the 12MP JPEG. Can anyone notice the difference? The votes came in, and to my great surprise, obviously, no one can tell the difference. Now I want to bear in mind here that any photography or any images that get posted onto an Instagram story, it's going to get compressed and squeezed. Nothing's going to look exceptional. But side by side, if Joe Blogs is looking at your images, he can't tell the difference between a 48MP ProRAW file and a 12MP version. So yeah, do with what you will with that information. I just thought it was interesting that I can sit here and talk about how amazing the 48MP ProRAW file is, and then when I post it online, no one can tell the difference between that and a standard 12MP JPEG. Want a camera that fits in your pocket? Well, here you go. That's why this exists, and that's pretty much why I upgraded. It's very convenient having this around all the time. Will it replace my professional cameras? Don't be daft. But will it help me a little bit in my creative workflow? 100%. But here's my point, and probably the most important point in this entire video, is that my 13 Pro felt just as helpful. The photos and videos I was taking on that phone feel just as good as the photos and videos I'm taking on the 14. And if you're pixel peeping and you're zooming into files and you're geeking out about specifications, then sure, you might be able to notice the 48MP files. They do look great. But is anyone really that bothered? My 13 Pro was fine. Okay, less moaning and more praise here. This colorway of the iPhone 14 Pro, the space black color, is probably the nicest color of any iPhone I've seen. In certain light, it looks pretty much completely matte black, and then in other situations, it looks like a really smooth gray. I like this a lot. So I could sit here and read you the iPhone 14 Pro spec sheet, or just go on the Apple website and read it yourself. The reality is, it depends what phone you had before, whether you can tell a big difference or not when upgrading. I could have kept the iPhone 13 Pro and my life would have been the same. my photos would have been the same, and my content would have been pretty much identical. If you're serious about photography, however, I recommend getting an actual camera, like the Fujifilm X100V. That little beast changed my life, but I'm sure that is for another video. Thank you for watching my iPhone 14 Pro thoughts, impressions, opinions, review. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.